welcome to another lawnfawn video. Today we are so excited to be introducing our Deck the Car dies, and we're also going to be introducing our birch tree stencil. So let's go ahead and check it out. Deck the Car is one of our paper piecing style dies, and these are so much fun to put together. And one of my favorite ways to put these together is to use a double-sided adhesive sheets. These sheets are so awesome. So what we're going to do is take a piece of black cardstock and then just trim down one of these adhesive sheets to match the cardstock. We're going to peel up the liner paper and then attach that down to the cardstock. And this is effectively going to create a sticker. Then we're going to take the base images, so that's the open car and that base tree there, and we're going to die cut this awesome black cardstock that already has adhesive on it. And these are going to be the bases for the paper piecing style. Then we're going to take the frame die pieces, those are the ones that have all those little details on them, and we're going to die cut a bunch of different colors of cardstock that you'll see that we have here in this little tray ready to play with. The first thing we're going to do is peel up that liner paper on that black cardstock base. So now we've got the black cardstock with that adhesive stuck to the whole thing. Then we're going to take the frame pieces die cut out of the same black licorice cardstock, and we're going to layer those pieces on top. And this is nice and easy because you just line up the two pieces. They are the exact same size as each other. Now that we have these black frames on top, this is going to give us little areas for us to add color into the images. And we're going to do that with different colors of cardstock. So this is Noble Fir, a really pretty green, and we're going to layer that right into the present. And this is one of my favorite things because you kind of drop the pieces in like a little puzzle piece, and there's something just very satisfying about it. I really love it. I just love doing these. Next, we're going to work on the tree. So we're going to drop in those green pieces for the tree and then a little trunk at the bottom. Now here we're using a black frame for these pieces so that it kind of feels like a stamped image that you stamped in black ink, but you could use white, brown, you can even use like cool holographic cardstock. There's so many different ways to use these. Now we're adding color to these cute little die cut images using different colors of cardstock, but you can also cut this out of white cardstock and add color with ink or markers, and that's a really fun way to use these. And we have a bunch of different styles of these. This one's super cute for the holidays, although that car you could use year-round, which is awesome. But we also have fun other designs that are year-round or for different occasions. So now we're going to go ahead and drop in some white cardstock for those little windows. And later on in this video, Shari's going to make a card where she adds a cute little dog into the window, and it is just the sweetest thing. And then we're going to work on the tires. And this was really fun. We die cut the frame out of some silver metallic cardstock to add some of these kind of car details for the tail light and the little rims of the wheels, and there's something about that that just makes it feel really special. I also think it would be really fun to use that silver frame on another piece, so you could die cut another base and then add your silver frame and then add the car that way. So all these extra little pieces, you can save them and create more different styles of cars with different colors and different details. Now here you can use the car on its own for an everyday card, or you can put the Christmas tree on top for that classic Christmas image that I just love. So you could do the tree, or you could do the little present as well. I think it would be cute to do a bunch of presents and kind of stack them up in a little pyramid on top of the car. Next up, we're going to take a look at the birch tree stencils. And this stencil comes with two sets, one that gives you birch trees and then one that gives you the sky around the birch trees. And so what's really cool about these is you can see here how they layer together perfectly. So one is the positive and one is the negative, and you can use each on their own or you can use them together. And so we're going to take a look at that right now. So first up, we're going to start with the one that creates the birch trees, and we're going to be using some gray ink on these birch trees. And these are just gorgeous. They're great for fall, winter, or year-round as well. For winter, I think using things like white paste or white ink looks really, really pretty, like they're covered in snow. Just so gorgeous. We can use gray, you can use brown. There's a lot of cool different colors, and Shari is making 3 cards in this video, and she's going to show you a bunch of different techniques with these. And I'm just using my brush and my ink. This is manatee ink, which is a nice light gray. And then just lightly going over these birch trees, and you're going to get these beautiful details onto your card. And here is always my favorite part. We'll reveal the birch trees, and this right here is gorgeous. You could add a little ground, a cute critter, and your card would be done. And you could, of course, do it just like this. But I wanted to show you how to use the opposite stencil, the one that gives you the sky. So what's really cool about this stencil is that you can line it up with the birch trees you just created. So I'm literally just looking through the stencil, lining up all those little notches, making sure that it's it's nice and straight. Then I can hold my stencil in place with the magnets and add a sky. So I'm going to use some mermaid ink here, which is just a nice like turquoisey blue, to create a sky in these birch trees. The other thing you could do would be to do this with just this one. So you could just add the blue and then it would appear as if you had white birch trees. So that's how you would use this stencil on its own. And here we're looking at how to use it together with the other stencil included in the set. So we're adding some blue sky there. And then we'll be able to lift up the stencil and you'll see that we have our gray trees and our blue sky. So once again, you can use them each separately or you can use them together. And if you use the sky one on its own, you'll get these cool white birch trees with a beautiful blue sky. Now Shari is going to create 3 gorgeous cards from start to finish, so take it away, Shari.
For this card, I'm going to be creating a night sky, and I'm starting out with some blue Jay cardstock, and I'll be darkening up the edges with some black soot distress oxide. This is a really easy way to kind of get that vignette style look with those dark sides, and you're starting with a piece of colored cardstock so you don't have to ink blend this whole piece. You can, of course, ink blend this whole sky, but this is a really easy way to do this nice and quick, especially if you have a colored cardstock that you like to start out with. So I'm just darkening up those corners and the top, down the sides a little bit, and blending that out till I get the look that I want. Now I'm moving on to my little trees. This is going to be the hillside and the trees that my little car is going to drive on. I'm using a piece of pixie dust cardstock, so I'll get this nice glittery white look to the snow, and those trees will look like they are covered in ice and snow against that dark sky. Now I'm adding some snowflakes to my sky using the Frosties stamp set. My Frosties is an original, it is well loved, but it is one of my favorites. Now I'm making sure to add all my snowflakes above my trees. I did this before and my snowflakes went too far down and my trees sort of got lost. So I'm just laying all my snowflakes where I want them, and I will stamp them all at one time. So I'm just going to put this in my Misty and pick all those snowflakes up with the door of the Misty. I'm going to be doing some white embossing with some unicorn sparkle embossing powder. So I've prepped my surface with my anti-static embossing tool, and for this I'm using my Yeti ink, so my embossing powder will stick to that ink. This also allows me to really see my snowflakes really well. So I'll add that unicorn sparkle embossing powder on there. This is going to give me some nice bright white snowflakes that also have that really fun glitter sparkle in there. And then I can heat that up with my heat tool till it's all nice and melted. I'm also heating it from the back a little bit to help with the warping from the heat. And then now I'm pulling out my metallic watercolors and using that white to add some splatters. So I'm going to do some small splatters by tapping it with my block, and then some larger splatters by tapping it with my finger. And this just nicely fills in between my big snowflakes and makes that sky look like it is full of snow. Now I'm moving on to my little car. I've cut out the present, the solid piece, from a piece of cardstock with double-sided adhesive. So I've pulled off that liner paper, and then I can add the frame, which is cut from black, the pieces of the present, which is cut from cilantro, and then the bow, which is cut from some chili pepper cardstock. And I'm just going to lay that one on top and pop those pieces in. Now I've done the same with the car, cut that from a piece of cardstock that was layered with the double-sided adhesive sheet. So I can easily stick all these pieces down, starting with that outside frame. Then of course my car is a bright, fun, festive red car. And then of course you want to add those interior frames of the windows. I've got some narwhal cardstock just for the back bumper there, and I'm also going to use that for the tires. And I also have a tiny piece of yellow cardstock that I cut for the headlight. So I'm using that narwhal cardstock for the tires. And then I'll use the black frame, that's the interior part of the tire. And then I'll go back to that narwhal for the center piece. And then for the windows, I'm using some Moonstone cardstock. Now this is super cute just as it is with that little present that's going to go on top of the car, but I thought it would be fun to put a little passenger inside my car. And these little dogs and critters and these Simply Celebrate critters are perfect because they are holding on, or their little paws are hanging over that line, and it looks just like they've got their paws on the car door. So I'm just doing some simple Copic coloring with a brown marker. I didn't even do a lot of shading. I just used the same color for the whole thing. And then I'm going to fussy cut this out so that I do not have that white border. I'm also not going to worry about his tail because it will be hard to connect that because we only have that little line connecting the two. You could also just cut the tail separately and also add it. Now to make this look nice and finished, I'm going around the edges with a black marker so that you don't see that white cardstock. And now that my little dog is colored and cut out, I can add some glue and just add him like he is looking out the window, and I just think that this is so cute. Now I can start to assemble my card, and I'm putting my background piece that I created onto my card base, making sure that it's stuck down really well on all four sides. Then I can add my snowy ground with my icy snowy trees, and I'm using liquid glue to make sure that these trees get nice and stuck down. And I'll just line that up along the bottom of that card front. Now before I glue down my little dog in the car and the present, I want to work on my sentiment. And I'm using a mix of a stamped sentiment and a die cut sentiment. So I'm going to be using the Offset Sayings Christmas stamp set for the word holidays. And then I'm using Finley's ABCs for a die cut sentiment. I am embossing the word holidays with that same unicorn sparkle embossing powder onto a piece of black cardstock. And once this is nice and melted, I'm just going to trim it down so I have this little banner piece with the word holidays. And I'm just going to use my scissors to cut this out. You could use your paper trimmer if you wanted to. And now I can put down my little car using some foam squares, making sure that's pretty low to the ground, and also my present, because my sentiment is going to go above. So I want to leave a lot of space up there for this sentiment. I'm also going to pop up this little banner that I created. And I'm using some black foam squares for this one since it is a piece of black cardstock. I'll just center that up right above my present. And then now I can add my die cut letters. I'm starting with the P that is in the middle, and then I will work my way out in both directions. I'm also sort of curving this word a little bit, so I don't have to worry about it being perfectly straight, but you get this kind of nice arched effect by doing this. This is also a good reason to start in the center. Not only is it centered, but then you can arch those letters as you work your way out and make it nice and even. Now to add some sparkle glaze, I thought it would be fun to make this car look like it has been out in the ice and snow. So I'm giving it a nice layer of glitter ice all over the top, all over the tires. We've got some on the windows and of course that present on top. So I'm hoping that present isn't going to get ruined in this icy winter wonderland that we're driving through. And I'm finishing off with some black glaze for a shiny nose on my dog. And then here is my finished card. I just think it is so fun with those big frosty snowflakes in the sky and that cute little dog driving the car. So the card I'm creating today uses the Deck the Car dies, and I'm starting out with a piece of double-sided adhesive sheet. I've cut this to be the same size as my piece of paper. Now this is going to give me some leftover sheet that I can use for some other projects, but I am going to use this double-sided adhesive sheet to completely cover this piece of cardstock, and I will cut the solid pieces from this. So I will have complete adhesive all over the solid pieces. For this one, I'm using the car and the tree, so I will cut those pieces out. And then I've also cut the frame part of the tree from some colored cardstock pieces, and I'll start to assemble that. For the frame or the outline of my tree, I'm using Noble Fir Cardstock. For the inside of my tree, I'm using some cilantro, and then of course I'm using some paper bag for that trunk down there. I just kind of popped that out. I lined it up and popped it into the trunk. And then I can just pop the pieces of the tree into the openings left by the frame. And because I have adhesive all over this piece, everything's going to stick down really nicely. So there is my little tree, and now I'm going to do the same thing for the car. So I've pulled that adhesive liner off of my solid piece that is the backer of the car. I'm going to start with my frame, and I'm using some storm cloud cardstock for the frame, so it's a dark gray rather than black. The body of the car is cut from some rainforest cardstock, and then of course on this die you've got some interior pieces that frame out the windows of the car. So I want to make sure not to throw that storm cloud cardstock away until I get those outline pieces of the windows in there. For the windows I'm using narwhal cardstock. And then for the tires, I actually cut this from some black glitter cardstock. So I'm going to have some shiny tires on this particular car. So I'm just popping out the inside piece of those tires. For the frame piece of the tire, I'm going to go back to that storm cloud cardstock. And I'm actually going to pop in that center piece, but I decided it was all too black. So I'm actually going to pull out that tiny circle in the center. Just with my tweezers, pop that back out and use the narwhal gray. And that just makes the center of those tires just stand out a little bit more. It just depends on the look you're going for. Now I'm going to use that same narwhal cardstock for the bumper on the back of the car. And then for the light on the front, I'm actually cutting this out of some pixie dust white glitter cardstock. So I have the glitteriness that's on the tires for the little light as well. And I'm just going to go in with a yellow Copic marker and just kind of tap this with the tip and color that white glitter cardstock and make it yellow. So here is my finished car. And then I thought it would be really cute to wrap up my tree because obviously they've gone to the tree lot and they are coming home with the tree, and you know how they wrap it up in that mesh to keep the tree all nice and tight while it is on top of your car. So I'm using some peppermint twine to do this, and I just wrapped it one direction and then wrapped it back the other direction, so I kind of had this zigzag pattern going on. And then I'm just going to secure it on the back with a little bit of washi tape. And this will hold it in place, and no one's ever going to see this piece of tape. So I'm just pulling that tight and I'll hold that down, and then I can trim off the extra pieces that stick out from behind the tape. And how cute is that sitting on top of the car? Now to work on the background of this card, I'm using this light blue that has the little stars from the Let It Shine Starry Skies paper pack. I'm just trimming this down to 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So this will be my pattern paper background piece that I start with. And then I am going to do some stenciling on this. So I'm just putting a little bit of removable adhesive onto the back of it. I'm lining it up on my media mat, which is magnetic. And then I will use the birch tree stencil to give us some trees in the background. So I'm just lining this up kind of where I want it. I'm looking at the little branches that stick out to see what I want to see and what I don't want to see. I know that the bottom is going to get covered up. So once I have that where I like it, I'll just hold it in place with some magnets. Now, since I am stenciling on some pattern paper, I am going to use some oxide ink because it has a pigment property and it will cover up that pattern. I'm starting out with weathered wood, and I'm just going to fill in all these trees all the way across this background. I'm making sure that I hold down this little V piece there. You could put a magnet down there. I just want to make sure I don't catch it with my blending tool. So once I have this all covered and all of my trees filled in, I decided to pull in another color. I was trying to decide between this weathered wood, which is a nice gray color, or a brown color for these trees, and what I ended up doing was pulling in my brown color, which is walnut stain. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of brown just kind of to the bottom of the trees. And I'm just being very light-handed with this, but this just gives them a little bit of interest and definition so they're not so flat and gray. They have these nice two-tone look to them. So you're going to see here in just a second, once I get this last one inked up, when I pull that stencil away, you can kind of see how the color changes a little bit from the top to the bottom. Now for the bottom, I've got some pixie dust glitter cardstock, and I'm just going to use one of the stitched hillsides to cut some sparkly snow for my car to drive on. And I'm just figuring out how far up I want this to go so that I have enough space above my car for a sentiment. So you can see here I've got my snowy hill, my car is going to fit on there nicely, and I have plenty of space above it for my sentiment. Now I did stamp this sentiment directly onto the card base at first using some black ink. And you can see it really well and it looks fine, but once I got everything kind of laid out, I felt like I needed a little pop of red on this card. So you can see that this looks fine. It looks perfect. But here's a little tip if you don't like the way this turns out. This is where a sentiment banner comes in very, very handy. So when I laid my car on here, I laid that tree, I just thought it'd be nice to pull some of that red in the twine out into the card. So what I'm going to do is just re-stamp that same sentiment. I'm doing it on some red cardstock. I'm actually going to heat emboss this so that it's nice and bright and white on this red. So the banner will kind of mimic the colors of my peppermint twine that is wrapping around my tree. So I've just prepped my cardstock with my anti-static powder tool, and I'm getting my embossing powder ready. I'm going to stamp this with some clear embossing ink. So I'll just stamp that down. Then I can cover this with that white embossing powder. And then I will just heat this up with my heat tool. Now I think that you could also stamp this directly onto an already die cut banner, but this gives me a little more cardstock to hold on to, and it makes it a little easier to stamp when you have a larger piece of cardstock. So I'm just melting that embossing powder till I get that nice bright white sentiment, and then I can go in with my sentiment banner. They're open in the center, so it's easy to line them up and get everything nice and even, and I can run this through my die cut machine, and then I will have a sentiment banner to layer over top of that stamped sentiment. So I've just put some adhesive all over the back of this background piece, and I'm just layering that onto a card base. Then I'm using some foam tape for the glittery snowy ground. So I've just put a piece all the way across and a couple up on that hilltop. And then I'll also use some foam adhesive squares for my car that's driving up this little hill. And I will also put some on the tree. Now I did take those little pieces. I'm actually going to put a little dot of glue to make sure that this twine holds really well and doesn't come loose from the washi tape. Then I'm going to take my little squares here and I've cut them in half so that I can fit them in between the crisscrosses of the twine. That way they're right on the cardstock and they're not sticking to the twine. And then everything will lay nice and flat on top of the car. And then now I can go to that sentiment banner that I created to cover up that other sentiment. I really like that this adds that pop of red that I wanted, but also now I can add some foam squares to the back of the sentiment banner and have some dimension with my sentiment as well above the car. So I'm just lining that up right where I had stamped it before, and I'll stick that down and you will never know that I changed my mind. Now I'm going in with some Stickles glitter glue and adding some sparkle to those outlined words in the sentiment Merry Christmas. And that'll just add some glitter to tie that in with the glitter on my car. And then this is my finished card. I just think that's super cute. I love the twine wrapped around the tree. On my card today, I'm going to be creating a winter scene, and I'm going to be blending some different colors for my sky. I'm starting out with a piece of Bristol cardstock, and I'll be using these warm red-pink tones. Starting out with saltwater taffy and just putting a base of this lightest color all over this piece of cardstock. I'll be using a little scrap piece of paper to hold my cardstock so I don't get any fingerprints. And then next I'm going to go in with the next color, which is picked raspberry, and pull that color down from the top and the corners so that I have a glow of that lighter color kind of towards my horizon line, going up to that brighter pink towards the top. Finally, I will go in with Festive berries for my darkest color, and I just want to keep this right around the edge because it is much more red, and I kind of like that darker pink look for the most of my sky. So now that I have my colors looking the way I want, I'm moving on to some stenciling. I'm starting out with my birch tree stencil sort of shifted far to the left. I will tape off that right side so that I don't accidentally ink over that edge and get any ink off the edge of the stencil. And I'm creating some trees like further away in the background, so I want these to be much lighter. So I'm using some white Yeti pigment ink to kind of give these like a ghosty tree off in the distance. So they still look pink, and also make sure it's free of dog hair. That's what I'm doing there. And I'm just using my blending brush to put a light layer of this down. I'm doing a lot of tapping of this and then blending it out so it's nice and smooth. But I feel like tapping that pigment ink on first and then kind of smoothing it out is the best method to use when using pigment ink like this. It especially works much better with white for some reason. So now that I have all of my trees sort of filled in, you can see how you get that sort of light ghosty look there. I'm going to remove my stencil. And then for my second layer, I'm actually going to flip my stencil so that my trees are not exactly the same. They're sort of going in different directions. I'm going to probably put it a little bit higher. And you can see that some of these trees are going to get covered up by this next layer. And then others, the new trees will be sort of between the inked layers that I've already done. So once I have this where I want it, I'm pulling out my texture paste. And then I'm just going to add a layer of textured white texture paste. So you can see I'm making sure it's sort of not smooth. I got some thicker spaces and some thinner spaces, and it just makes it look more like a tree and a little less perfect. And I'm just putting a layer of this all over my background with the second layer of trees. So these trees are closer to us in the foreground, and they're going to be a lot brighter and actually look kind of dimensional because they are made from this paste. So now I can pull this away and you will see these paste birch trees, and those ones in the background look more ghosted than before. Now I thought it would be fun to add some glitter to these so it sticks to that paste while it's still wet. What I didn't expect was that my pigment ink in the back was still a little bit wet as well. So I had glitter stick to that, but I actually really liked the way it turned out. So I'm going to tap off the extra. And then I actually took a brush and kind of moved that glitter around that was on that pigment ink. And even added a little bit more just so it didn't look like the stripiness of the way I had dropped the glitter onto the paper. Now for the images of my card, I pulled out the Winter Skies stamp set and stamped out the cute little bears. I'm coloring these like they are polar bears, so I'm using some cool grays to kind of give a little bit of shading around the outside, and then I'm blending it out with a really pale gray, and then I will use the blender pen to blend it out to nothing. I like using these as polar bears on this card because the color of the bears won't distract from that beautiful background that I've created. I am going to color their scarves, but I'm going to keep them all the same color so that I only have this little pop of teal on my card. So I'm going to have that beautiful pink background and then these white bears staring off into my magical frosty forest. So I've just used a darker color around the edges of these scarves, and then I'm just filling in with my lighter color. I've cut my images out with the coordinating dies, and now I'm moving on to the snowy hill for them to sit on. I'm using some narwhal ink so that it's a gray sentiment instead of a stark black one. And this sentiment is also from that Winter Skies stamp set that says, "Wishing you and your family a magical holiday." I'm just going to cut the top of this with a simple stitched hillside so that I have this nice little hill for my bears to sit on. And you can see that is going to layer right along the bottom of those trees. My little bears can sit right on top. So I can start and assemble my card. Now my paste is nice and dry. I've just put adhesive all over the back of that panel and putting it onto a card base. For the snowy hill, I'm going to use liquid glue to glue this down because it is going to be glued across those trees that are made of paste, so I want to make sure that it sticks down really well. For the bears, I am using some foam squares, and I'm just adding a dot of liquid glue to the back of those because they're also going to be sticking to those birch trees that are created with the paste, and I want to make sure that everything sticks down really well. I used some thin foam squares for those two bears together, and then I'm using these slightly thicker ones or the regular sized ones for this bear, so we have a little bit of different dimension. Now to fill the sky with some snowflakes, I'm using some of the holographic cardstock and the little snowflake dies. And then I'm just going to fill the sky up with these snowflakes. I'm just placing them to figure out how I want to fill it. And I think this really adds to the sentiment. They're just kind of looking out into that magical forest filled with giant holographic glittering snowflakes. I'm just adding these with a little bit of liquid glue into the places where I had placed them before. And I just think that these snowflakes really finish off this card nicely. And then here is my finished card with those two layers of birch trees in the background, which I think is really fun. Those holographic snowflakes and those bears looking off into that magical wintry forest.
Oh my goodness, Shari, I love these cards so much. The pink sky, the cute tree with the twine wrapped around it, and then this beautiful blue sky with the frosty snowflakes are just gorgeous. And next up, we have some incredible cards by the design team. And this one by Audrey blew me away. I love the inking in the birch trees in the background with that beautiful giant greeting in the center. I just love how Grace added these cute little bears into the car. It's just the sweetest way to use this adorable deck the car. And then her beautiful rainbow sky with the frosties in the background are just stunning on her platform pop-up. This card here by Yainea is so beautiful. I love those birch trees and how a little bit of the blue is shining through on them. Here Elise shows us that deck the card can be used year-round in this adorable card, and I love how she used that road border. Here, Mindy shows us that the birch trees are perfect for fall theme cards too, and I just love it with that acorn house. This gorgeous unique color palette by Maureen is just beautiful. I love purple for Christmas and I can't wait to try this. This card by Elena is just stunning. I love those snow flurries in the background and how she added a little bit of white to the top of the tree for the snow. And then Mindy created a pumpkin house card that is so sweet with those birch trees in the background. Here we have this really fun card by Callie. She used the simple road border and some beautiful pasted trees in the background. And then this layout by Melissa, isn't this so sweet? I love how she's incorporated die cuts into her layout. It is just beautiful. Megan's card is just stunning, and I love how she used white cardstock to be the border for her images. It gives it such a soft and frosty look. This card by Letitia is just beautiful, and I love that bright pink and the gold that she's used on her winter card. And then here, Lynette has used the awesome backdrop there to create a scene for her adorable car, and I love how she added Copic marker to the tree. This card here by Kara is so much fun, and she used metallic cardstock for the car, which gives it such a cool look. And then here, Tammy created a platform pop-up, and I love the black, white, and red and green together. It's just beautiful. And then this card here by Kara is so sweet, and I love how she heat embossed frosties in the background too. So we cannot wait to see what you guys create with these products, so make sure to share it with us. Thank you so much for watching today, and I hope you have an absolutely amazing day. Bye!